Hey, this is Austin Harman Mixes here, and today I'm going to bring you a very special tutorial on drum mixing. Very excited. I'm going to take you start to finish through my process on mixing a drum set. And today, to switch it up a little bit, we're actually going to be doing this tutorial in Pro Tools so that you can really hear and feel every adjustment that I'm making without a in-between such as a microphone or some kind of recording device which can color the sound. So today you're going to get to hear the raw edits, the real stuff coming straight out of the computer. I have a mixed down session here that we're going to be using with a live drum set and a live band. Super excited to get started. Here we go. Okay, now that we've had an opportunity to hear the way that the drums sound, do note that there's a few things going on in here that I did for the studio specifically that may not necessarily translate to the live environment. Now I'm going to clear out all of these plugins and we're going to start with the raw microphones so we can work through together how this should be done. All right, let's start working on our drum set. Now a couple of caveats here before we get started. First and foremost, audio is always subjective, right? So everything I'm going to show you is just my approach. This approach may not work for everybody. This approach may not work for you. It depends on your stereo. It depends on your room. It quite honestly depends on your drummer. The drummer that we had playing on this night was a really good drummer, and that kind of helped to get the sound that we were looking for. But it started with us getting great sounds out of the drums themselves by having good heads, getting them tuned, having good sticks, having good pedals, and making sure that the drums overall sounded great well before we put a microphone on them. Then we had to make sure that we had good mic placement and we had good spacing between our overhead mics and our cymbal mics, all before we ever started taking a recording. Now everything you're about to hear is all nothing super fancy. It's all approachable microphones for most size churches. This drum set is a DW custom drum set. Again, it's nothing incredibly fancy, but it's also nothing super cheap. This is all middle of the road gear, and this is the sound that we're going to try and get out of it. Now, starting with the kick, we have a kick out and a kick in microphone. The kick out is a Shure Beta 52. The kick in is a Shure Beta 91. Shameless plug, ideal Shure, so if you would like to buy those microphones, link down in the description below. Now, let's hear how those microphones sound together. And let's just solo the kick out. And let's solo the kick in. Honestly, those microphone names sound like they're switched, but still good sounds nonetheless. Now, let's first start by just working on the kick in. Now, for the purposes of this tutorial and demonstration, I'm going to use a standard equalization plugin. The EQ knobs that I'm using here on this plugin will translate for both the studio and for your live environment. Okay, I have a Q, I have a frequency, and I have a gain. I have a high and a low pass filter. So let's go ahead and get to work here. First thing I'm hearing is quite a bit of mid-range here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this and just push it up. And I'm just going to find something I don't particularly like. Now note here how wide my Q is. I'm really grabbing a lot of sound. I'm going to take this down. I'm already liking that a lot better. Now next, this is my kick in microphone. So I'm going to see which one has better low end, the kick in or the kick out. Now in most cases the kick out should have it, but I suspect these microphones may be flipped, so I'm going to try this out here. And that sounds a lot more kicky. I'm going to bring this down. Yeah. Now what I like to do, especially in a live environment, is I'll grab this, instead of a shelf, I'll grab this little mini push here. I'm going to push right up, right around 43 hertz and get real tight. And then, now I really got it bumping down low. But I don't want all of that. Just a bit of push there. And then next, I'm hearing quite a bit of high end. I'm just going to kind of back that off a little bit. And then I'm going to put a low pass filter in. Pretty strong cue here to get those cymbals out. Now if I had just one microphone, okay, let's just say a Beta 52, this will work just fine for me. I might roll off the low end just a little bit to get it out of the subs, maybe to about 40 hertz. This is just to protect the equipment if you're concerned about popping your subs. But all of this does sound really good if you have good subwoofers. Now let's assume here that I actually have great subwoofers, so I'm going to back this off to about 30. And then also let's assume here that I'm going to use both mics. So I'm going to drag this low pass actually down because I'm only going to use this bottom little bit here. In fact, with this low pass, I'm only going to use about 250 and below. So let me hit play again, and I want you to hear this. Now that sounds not super great. Let's hear how it sounds with the kick out. Now I'm going to copy this EQ plugin so I have it. And I'll pull up this one, and I'm going to set this to the factory default settings. Now for this mic, I'm going to put the high pass on, and I'm going to roll this all the way up. All the way up to about 1K. And I'm also going to hit the phase. Now, I called this the phase. This is the polarity flip button for all of you who are out there who want to talk about that in the comments. This will flip the polarity on the microphone, which in theory should take it in or out of phase. Now that's a lot of high in there, so I'm just going to pull that down. Again, we're going to try and take care of a little bit of cymbals. And just like that, that's the EQ I'm going to do on the kick. Now, no kick is complete, though, without some high quality compression. Now, these mics from this point forward, I'm going to treat both of these sources as one. So I'm going to apply this compression on the kick group, but hear me out here. If you only have one microphone, this is the same as working with that one microphone. I'm just using this in a slightly different way. So I'm going to add a compressor here. This is the same as just going to a compressor on your console. Now I'm just going to grab a standard run-of-the-mill compressor here. All right. Now you can see the settings here. It's the same exact that you're used to on the console. Okay, we have a knee, we have an attack, gain, ratio, release. Now what I want to do here is I want to try and make the kick real punchy. Okay. Now we're going to do that by using a combination of attack, a nice gentle threshold, and a release. Okay, so I'm going to set this attack around 20. Now you might ask, well, why 20? Because I know from experience that around 20 to 30 is going to let just enough through that compressor where you really start to feel the bounciness of the kick if we start to get the threshold dialed in correctly. Now we're really starting to chomp in the kick here a little bit. Maybe a little bit too much, actually. You can hear that it very much still sounds musical, but I'm getting a nice boxiness to it. Or not a boxiness, I'm getting a nice bounce to it. Here I'm going to bypass this. And here's with it. Now, I wouldn't generally do this if you have a really good drum set player, but in the church environment, or maybe even in your live band, you may realize that not every drummer is perfect and consistent. So a little bit of gain here might help us out. All right, that's feeling much better. And that's it on the kick. Now, one thing you might also be able to do is dial in a gate. So we're going to go ahead and do the gate here. Let me go ahead and pull up the correct gate, actually. Expander/gate. Now, gate works very simply. Whenever you pass the threshold, the gate opens. And whenever you're not past the threshold, the gate closes. You can hear it's kind of bouncing a little bit. Now what we want is this. Okay. I'm going to change this range to be all the way at 0. The ratio all the way at 100, sorry. Range as low as it goes. And then I'm just going to dial this backwards. Okay. I'm going to dial that attack back. Okay, now what I did here is I moved the hold out to where the drum is sounding almost musical, right? Like it's not being constrained by the gate at all. And then I want to change the release time to where it closes sounding as natural as possible. Now you can hear that the cymbals are still making it through just a little bit. This is not perfect, but if this is translating into a live environment, this is about as good as you're going to get. Okay? Next, let's talk about the snare. So we have 2 microphones on the snare. We have an SM58, which is titled Snare Raw here, and we have an SM58 on the bottom snare. This is how they sound together. Okay, now let's go to work on the snare. Now the way I'm going to use these microphones Alright, let's get to work on the snare here. Now the way I'm going to use these microphones is slightly different than the kick in, kick out. I have a snare top and a snare bottom. Now the snare top is close to the top head, and therefore we're going to probably get a significant amount of low end from the snare out of that microphone. And the snare bottom is where you get a lot of the crack and a lot of the sizzle out of the snare. And I'm going to show you how we're going to use both of those together in order to get the sound that we're looking for. So here we go. Starting out with a 7-band EQ here. Now the first thing I'm going to do with the snare top is I'm actually going to roll the top end off first. Now what I want to do here is I want to get the ultra top end under control. So if you hear all this up here, that's a cymbal magnet, right? And if I roll that off, okay, now I'm left with something just a little bit darker. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to roll the extreme low end off because we don't need any of that too much. Now, the way that we actually roll the bottom end off is very important because the snare top is what's going to give us our low end, okay? So, first and foremost, I have this sitting at about 100, and I'm just going to do a boost right here at about 200. Now, 200 hertz is the magic frequency on a snare. And if I dial this in close, let me restart this here. Now listen, so as I scan around here in the 200 range, so that is a low-end harmonic to the actual resonant frequency of the snare, which is somewhere inside of what we want, right? It almost sounds like St. Angler Metallica, for all you Metallica fans out there. What we're really looking for is something a little bit more worshipy. So, still not quite there. So there it is. There's that low end we're looking for. Okay. Now, next, I'm going to search around up here. Hear a lot of that overtone in there. I'm just going to dive some of that out. Yeah, that sounded more snare-like. Next, I'm going to search for this real harsh stuff right in here, real stick. Okay, now this is sounding pretty good. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a compressor here. Now a snare is going to be a different strategy than the kick. With the snare, I really want to use the compressor to help me get some transient out. So I'm going to go up to about 20 to 25 here, some cases 30, and I'm going to change my ratio up pretty high, and I'm going to really bite the snare. But before I turn it on, I'm going to bypass it so you can hear it before and after. Now, to really over-exaggerate what we're trying to do, I'm going to turn the threshold down so you can really hear it. You hear how that really gives you kind of like a push in the body area? Now, obviously, I'm not going to leave it like this, but I think you can really get the idea of what we're trying to get at here. Okay, we're going to play with the release up or down based on taste. Now that is sounding real 1980s. Now if you're listening to this and you're like, Austin, what the heck, that sounds terrible. Now trust me for a minute. Listen to what we do now here with the bottom snare. Okay, now I'm just going to copy this EQ down just for time savings. And then I'm going to factory reset. Oh yeah, that lovely sound. Now this is just the bottom snare. Now, I'm going to leave the top alone, but on the bottom, I'm going to roll off to about 60 to 75. Now, why would I do that? Once upon a time, there was an exceptional audio engineer who actually mixed for Elevation Worship, still does. His name's Corey Edwards. He taught me that if you keep the bottom end of your snare bottom open, it helps to extend your snare drum down to your kick. Okay, so I like to leave that down here open. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look for some nastiness here. Gross. I'm also going to look at that real harsh stick there. Now, here is where the real magic on a snare top happens. I'm just going to really push right up here at the tip top. Okay, now listen to both of these together. Okay, now you can hear that top end push is really coming through the snare here. Okay, now let's also work on our compressor here. So I'm gonna come down here with this. Now we're really biting this. We don't want to do that in the bottom snare, but what we actually want to do is just give it just a little bit of gain. And we want to mainly just control the bottom snare volume. Okay. And we can use the release both ways to really extend that out. And I'm going to turn this attack backwards so we're really biting it. Now, next, let's just mix the sources here. Just gonna turn this down to taste. And let's hear this with the kick. Okay, now next, don't sleep on your reverbs, guys. So our snares are both being processed together in a snares group here, and I have a send here to the snare verb, and I am going to add a snare verb here on this snare plate short. So the way that Pro Tools works is I just tag in a little reverb in here, and just for the sake of time, I'm going to put a plate verb here. Okay, now let's listen to how this sounds. Yeah. Now just like that, that sounds pretty cool. But I'm going to back this pre-delay off just a little bit. Okay. Now the real magic here, and this is something that you can take home, this is a trick you can learn from me, is if you do a gated reverb. Okay. Now for this purpose, I'm going to drop this down and I'm going to do gated. Now, and mute this. Listen to how this sounds. I don't think we are actually hearing it. Oh, I see what's happening. We have to actually send it to the gated verb. Let me see if I can find that real quick here. Snare gate. Yeah, here we go. All right. Now that sounds really interesting. Just gonna put a touch of pre-delay on here. And if I... Now that's actually clipping, so I'm gonna bring that back just a little bit. Now, note here, what I'm looking for with this gated snare verb is I'm looking for it to really add a lot of body. This by itself is not going to sound very good, but when I put it all together, you can hear it without. That sounds okay. Now here's with it. And I mix it in with the kick. And that, my friends, is how you do a kick and snare mix down. And for the rest of the drum set, I'm going to be coming at you in part number 2, which will be out very soon. I hope that you enjoyed this video by Harman Mixes. I hope to meet you soon out there someday. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. And if you have a question, leave me a comment down below. I would love to answer you. It's one of my favorite parts about doing a YouTube channel. Please leave me a comment, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.